Hi, I'm Detroit City Councilman James Tate, representing District 1, and today we're discussing a topic that unfortunately many people are not talking about, and time is running out to apply. That's the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. Now, for the first time in the history of the state of Michigan, voters, not politicians, have the opportunity to change and draw the lines for the congressional districts where they live, the Michigan State House districts where they live, the Michigan State Senate districts where they live. Now, it may not seem like a big deal to some, but it must be important when you have groups like the Michigan Republican Party and others who are suing to prevent voters from having the right to apply. Now, I say that it's a right because in 2018, voters around this state overwhelmingly went to the polls and voted at the time this ballot initiative into law. You often hear talk about transferring power from the hands of the politicians and putting it back in the hands of the people. Well, Detroit, this is your opportunity to do just that. And the main requirement to be a part of the commission is simply being a registered voter. And this is a paid position. Joining us to discuss how to apply for the commission, who's applying for the commission, and why is it so controversial to some is Yvette McElroy Anderson. She is a volunteer with Voters Not Politicians. Gabrielle Blackman, she is with the Fannie Lou Hamer Political Action Committee, and Brandon A. Jessup, principal of the progressive public policy nonprofit Michigan Forward.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about how this commission came about. For years we've had politicians, I think this is really around the country, politicians drawing the lines for the districts within the state that they are representing in, and that created some angst amongst the community. Take it from there.
So in 2018, there was a ballot initiative and it was on our ballot, and voters overwhelmingly decided that it would be better if the lines were drawn by the voters and not the politicians. In the past, politicians would go into closed rooms, and based on who was in power or who was the majority, they would make the decisions about how congressional lines were drawn.
And you're talking about the majority of in the state, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And as a result of that, it resulted in politicians picking their voters and not, which gave an advantage, and they picked the folks and drew lines that would often pack and stack voters together so they could always ensure that they would stay in the majority.
So I would see these, I saw an example, I think it's with California, they call it Slay the Dragon. It was shaped like a dragon. And I think it almost looked the same way here in Michigan as well. It was hooked all around, especially when you start talking about was it the 14th congressional district?
Yes.
It was crazy. When you start talking about parts of Detroit, parts of Pontiac, how in the world are we talking about groups of individuals who live right next to each other deciding what happens to their own community? So overwhelmingly, the voters voted to support this particular initiative. So now it's in place.
Yes.
Who's participating so far? I mean, I know we have until June 1st of this year to apply to be a part of this commission. Who's applying, how many seats, and give us some more details about what this commission could potentially look like.
So the commission will be made up of 13 individuals, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 members who don't identify with either party. But so far, about 55% of the applicants have been white men. There has been about 5,600 people that have put their hat in the ring to be one of the commissioners. And the commission ultimately is designed to mirror the demographics of the state. And unfortunately, not enough people from our communities have applied, which means that we won't have our voices being represented, our interests being represented, etc. If that answered the question.
Absolutely. So at last check, I saw 10% African American. that have applied who have applied. The state of Michigan is at least 14%. So we're already, I mean, we're not even talking about huge numbers, but we're already
Right.
behind when you start talking about African Americans. We're not even talking about other people of color as
Right.
well. Now, Gabrielle, I do know that you did apply. You're someone who did apply to be one of these commissioners.
Yes.
How was the process, and how long did it take you to go through it?
So I'm going to start off with how the process was. Starting off, it was at Fellowship Chapel, and I'm going to just be quite honest. Me coming in there and being in the room, it was a little intimidating because it wasn't many people who looked like me. However, once I basically investigated and learned the different information about the role, it still encouraged me because I know that I've been interested in politics since I was younger. I've been around it. So it wasn't something that I, wasn't familiar with. So the process was basically they had the information in the room. You had to fill out an application. You gave different information about yourself, name, address, driver's license number, and things like that. And then they took your information over to a, what is their name?
Notary.
What is it?
A notary.
Notary, yes, the notary. So the notary went over your paperwork, and then they basically checked to make sure everything was good, notarized it, and sent it off. So that was, I believe the event was back in, it was January or February. February. And then I just received the paperwork on the, matter of fact, May 2nd, that my application was received, and they tell you the next step. So it was rather easy. But prior to this, though, being in the community, and I'm in the Northwest Detroit area, I didn't even know anything about this. I didn't know what happens, where to go, who, it's not like it's information that they want you to have. So yeah. I'll say that. But as far as getting it done, the process was very easy. They did, it wasn't like voter intimidation or something, to make you feel uncomfortable when you're doing the application. It did, it was a breeze to get through that part. So I think it just needs to be, maybe it just needs to be put out more in the community, and then people will want to apply.
But that was pre-COVID.
Yes, that was pre-COVID.
So
yeah, it's a different world. So, I mean, but we're talking about real simple questions, though. We're not talking about you got to create a thesis in order to get on this particular commission. Real simple information that you can be able to answer right then and there.
It was a very simple application. Now, I'm going to say this. There may have been some questions on there that may ask you, why do you feel like this is a good position for you? Or I think a little voter education would probably be beneficial to someone to apply. So maybe like if before they had the application, maybe we could have like an interest session to say, hey, if you're interested, these are the type of things that you may want to say, or these are the type of things that you want to do, so you can be prepared to apply. But it wasn't anything intimidating where you couldn't answer the questions. It may have, but you may have needed like maybe 5 or 10 minutes so you could get your sentence structure together or something like that. But for the most part, it was fairly easy.
Awesome. So, Brandon, I know you're on the ground. You've been doing voter engagement work for years, and that's what you do with Michigan Forward. There's a lot of people that are disaffected right now. A lot of people who do not believe in the process. And when I'm talking about the process, I'm talking about government in general, even in a situation where they have an opportunity now to take control. How do you convince someone who is skeptical about getting involved in something as large as this? We're talking about the state. Then we start talking about Democrats, Republicans, and non-affiliated, all of this stuff. And here you are back again. I don't want to deal with that. How do you convince someone who is skeptical about participating in the process and being a commissioner?
I think the numbers say it by itself, especially like post-COVID right now, right? When you're talking about resources to your community, like the commission directs and draws the maps as far as like how those resources are being identified. And so, the things that we're dealing with right now at the local level, understanding that, like, yes, these maps are not drawn to us by not only by political lines, but something else that came from the commission in 2018 was that communities of interest would take a priority as to how lines are being drawn. So we talked about the 14th congressional district, how it goes from Pontiac all the way down to Grosse Pointe. And what does Pontiac have an interest with Grosse Pointe outside of like having good resources, right? And so it's kind of hard to talk to Grosse Pointe about what they need and talk to Pontiac in the same room about what they need. Now we have the opportunity to draw lines around our community specifically and begin to say, like, yes, this is what Waterford, Pontiac, and some parts of Oakland County need as a shared resource. And then we can start moving some of the things forward that we see ourselves fighting across 3 counties for. Like, think about that. It's hard just driving up and down 8 Mile sometimes to seeing the division between north and south of 8 Mile. And that, once again, is another connotation of how lines have been drawn in this state for over 100 years. So, you know, right now I got to be clear that to our community, the way the odds are, we don't have enough applicants just to make sure that we're represented in this entire commission. I don't care about your political affiliation, right? You could be independent, you could be a Democrat, you could be a Republican, which is why we wanted to do this 2 years ago, because prior to, you had to be a Democrat or a Republican to go behind that closed door to even have the conversation. So, you know, this is a wide open process right now. And if we don't take advantage of it, 10 years later, we'll be reaping what we have not sown, right? I think that's something we have to definitely think about, that this commission makes decisions for a decade. So, and they're taking, this is the handoff from the census. So I know this is not a conversation about the census, but, you know, hey, like, if we got questions about what the numbers may look like from what's going to be drawn from the census count, hey, that commission has the power to question it and say we need to bring in more information from communities of interest, such as churches, all right, such as school districts, such as parents, to say, hey, what do you need in your district, and have we drawn political boundaries that represent your needs and your interests? So once again, like Commissioner Tate, you said it very clearly, like we're less than 12% of just the applicants coming in. If we're going to play the odds, I know it's going to be a lot of folks who's probably heading in and out and may play the numbers every once in a while. Okay, you know, if you want to win, you got to put in more than one ticket. Okay, yeah. So let's be very clear. We need young people who are able to and ready, not only just to have the time, because this is not a volunteer effort. I want to really bring that up. This is a compensated position as an elected official with the state of Michigan.
We're talking $40,000, right?
That's a quarter of the governor's salary. It's not like we just pulled the number out of thin air. We said, hey, we want to treat this commission and the commissioners with respect, that these are people who will be serving in a very important duty for the next decade, and we're going to compensate you to at least $40,000. That does not include your travel costs, all right? Because yes, as a commissioner, you're going to be asked to move around a little bit, and we're going to make sure that you're safe and well as we do that. So those are all things that right now, like, we haven't seen that in public service, right? Mr. Tate, you remember just volunteering for how long before you became a councilman?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, so, and we're also talking about a situation where if you're currently employed and you're selected as a commissioner, you can put a pause on your current employment, do those 2 years, I believe it's about 2 years of service, compensated service with the commission, and guaranteed by the Michigan Constitution to get your job back once you return. There's nothing else like it.
You can't beat that with an egg beater. That's what my grandma would say.
So, I mean, now, how is this the commission selected? Now, that's another thing. I mean, now I put my name into the hat. How do I, you know, we talk about the odds. You know, you got to be in it to win it. Yvette, how is the commission, the individuals on the commission, how are they selected? Can't hear you. Turn your volume on.
So what happens is there will be, after June 1st, there are going to be 200 people randomly drawn out of all of those applicants. And there's going to be an algorithm that's used to ensure that the applicants, those 200 are represented based on the demographics of the state in terms of nationality, you know, blacks, whites, men, women, demographics, geographics in terms of Upper Peninsula, and all of those are going to be weighted, and it's going to get to the 200. Then the Speaker of the House and the Speaker of the Senate, both the majority and minority, will have an opportunity to chime in if I'm not saying it correctly, Brandon. They will have a chance to like throw out some of the folks that are in that pool. And then we will work toward getting down, using those algorithms, getting down to the 13 commissioners. Okay?
Got it. So, and I looked at the data again, and in addition to the disparities, if you will, the huge gap in the racial divide, if you will, of those applicants, I also saw a huge gap in the age range of those who were participating. What I saw at 80% plus represented those who are 45 and older. I'm looking at you, Gabrielle, and you know you don't have the same amount of gray in your hair as I have in mine. Oh, you got a little in there.
Oh, it's up there.
You hide me very well. Now tell me this, what made you decide to throw your hat in the ring? What was it about this commission that enticed you to get involved?
Being wholeheartedly
well.
honest, I have a couple different backgrounds. I have a tech background. That's where I went to school at. So I went to Grand Circuit. So I'm in the tech industry where that's a diverse industry. So I see a lot of different things in that industry. And then I've been in politics all of my life due to who my pastor is. So I know politics backwards and forwards. I've been and had the experience. So I just think it's important to have different backgrounds and being able to know what's needed in those backgrounds, because it helps educate you and sometimes people that you're around, and it's important. So that's what made me get into it, because I started off, I used to work at the Election Commission as younger in my 20s. I worked training the electronic poll booking. I used to work at, so when you've been in those different areas, it kind of gives you the push that you know what's needed in different areas, especially this area of gerrymandering and all of that. So you know what's important.
So we're almost about to wrap up. So Gabrielle, one more question for you. If you're selected as a commissioner, what are the things that you're looking at? What are the things that you will weigh in order to make a decision on these drawing of the lines?
I'm gonna look at the community, because they're gonna give you, a lot of the times, right, what's around you is gonna give you the answers of what's needed. What else is something I would look for? When you look at the community, and then you also ask questions, because then you know where it's coming from. You know they've told you directly what's a need. So I think those two things, and probably my personal, me being a mother, having children, the type of resources and things that even if I was the richest in my position or the lowest, what would I need in those positions? Because that would be an active answer. You know what you need based on what you experience.
So it sounds like participating in these forums when they come around, once the commission is set, is just as important as applying as well.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about, Brandon, right now, more than 5,600 people have applied. There's only 13 seats. Right. If you're one of those 5,600 plus who participated and you did not get selected, do you go away and just take your ball and go home?
No.
Some people might, but those weren't the folks that you want to have included in this process anyway. We need people that are looking at this as a community aspect and saying like, yes, I gave my shot in to be a commissioner, but like you said, like we're going to have 13 months of just meeting and conversating about what these maps look like. The meat and potatoes of this is the commission work itself, right? We see that right now with the city charter commission review process.
Yeah.
It takes the community to really have their input, and we really wouldn't fulfill our destiny in this if we don't participate to keep these meetings open.
Yes.
And to make sure that they're accessible, regardless of just showing up in person, right? But now we have to make sure that we have access remotely, right? So if no matter where I am in the state of Michigan, I should be able to chime in and be able to participate in the process. It's very important. I'm working right now to make sure that a lot of the data sets that come to states across the country are reflective of not just the majority, which is overwhelmingly white in this nation. But we have more information on people of color, our household sizes, what's our income levels looking like, and what's the distance that we have to travel to get back and forth to work. That dictates how much road funding we get. In Midland, Michigan, just 24 hours ago, we had two dams breach. Okay, now if we talk about funding in mid-Michigan, and understanding that, yes, that our infrastructure is over 75 years old in a lot of cases. And this state by itself has over 80% of its bridges needing repair. That is a direct result of our districts being drawn and gerrymandered. And so like we're looking at an infrastructure in our country, and especially here in Michigan, that's crumbling because conservatives have taken too much time and too much money from our communities and given it to a whole bunch of rich folks. So if you feel like you're missing something and you want to get something in the process, right? You want to get something in the process, right? The application for the commission is one step in the place, but then also get involved once the commission is set, because on September 2nd, they're going to get to work. They're going to get to work and they won't wait.
So last question I'm going to send to you, Yvette. I mean, I talked about it earlier. There was a lawsuit that was filed by individuals, and some of those individuals was the Michigan Republican Party. They were plaintiffs in that lawsuit to try to get this thrown out. Well, thankfully the courts sided on the right side and did not do that. But the battles we know aren't over with. We know that. Many times in underserved communities and just communities in general, urban communities for sure, a lot of the debate happens on social media. And we don't take advantage of the court process as well like others do.
Yeah.
Here we are trying to get the word out. How do you think we get the word out to people, the ones who we absolutely need to be a part of this process, who will absolutely be affected by this process? What's the best way to do that?
Well, we know that young people are all over social media. So you doing this type of recorded message that will be on the social media channels is one way. Texting is another way, because we know text messages are instantaneous, and that's the kind of quick contacts that oftentimes younger people are looking for. Pointing people to the links for the application process by going to votersnotpoliticians.com to apply to be a member of the Redistricting Commission, or the Michigan Secretary of State's website to apply to be a member of the Redistricting. Simple connections, like what Brandon said about the data. You don't need to have any type of specialized degree or anything to apply for this commission. In order to do this, I think, if you are able to read, you are able to collaborate, you're willing to work together, they're going to have a budget that will help you with data, maps. They have a number of resources that will be beneficial in helping you to figure out what it is that you need to do to work with the other 12 commissioners. And then if you're not selected, we still need your voice to ensure that you are going to the town hall meetings where they are presenting maps and so you can give your input and feedback. And if we want those maps and those lines to be drawn with us in mind, our voice needs to be at the table, either as a commissioner or as a participant in the town halls that will be going around the state.
All right, well, we're gonna have to leave it right there, but as Brandon said, in order to be in, to win it, you gotta be in it. And
Right.
so the way that you can be in it, for those who are watching, you can go to vnp.vote/application. VNP, that's for voters, not politicians, for those who are not paying attention. vnp.vote/application. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We have Yvette McElroy Anderson, a volunteer with Voters Not Politicians, Brandon Jessup, a principal of Michigan Forward, and Gabrielle Blackman, who is with Fannie Lou Hamer Political Action Committee. Thank you all for joining us today, and please stay safe as you go throughout the rest of your day. This crazy situation with this coronavirus.
All right.
Thank you so
for
much.
having
Be
us.
blessed.
All right. Take good care.
Will do.